Here, or watching the recording now, very good. Everybody knows me, my name's Janet. I'm one of the teachers here at the Shambhala Center. And I've actually been in Shambhala since I was 26, and I'm 73 now, so that's like a long time. Although there are people who've been in the community longer. But the ones who are younger than me started when they were really young. Because our community started about 1970, generally when our founding teacher moved from England to North America. The founding teacher for this network of meditation centers was a Tibetan meditation master, you might say, very well-known meditation teacher named Chogyam Trungpa. That was his Tibetan name. And today I decided that I would put a picture of him up here so you, rather than talking about him vaguely, he was actually a real person. Born in Tibet and then left Tibet when all the Tibetans, the leaders had to leave Tibet or get imprisoned, which was 1959 when he was 19. And he lived in England, then Scotland, then North America, Canada and the US. And when he died, he was only 47. So he died in 1987. But he did a lot of teaching in between his youth and now. So I've been starting, so this is a series we're calling Shambhala 101 to really introduce people to our community and the way it holds meditation practice. So just to start with a couple of things about meditation practice, our minds and our thinking profoundly shape how we see the world, right? And we know that because we know people who see the world really differently than we do. And we're all seeing the same thing, but it's all based on how we shape our perception, even our sense perceptions, but definitely our interpretations. And we work overtime on that. We're always explaining things to ourselves, Even talking to ourselves about what we're doing or what we're about to do or what we just did or what we believe or what we think or how annoyed we are, blah, 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 blah. And we do that, I think, to make a really broad generalization, we do that to help ourselves feel okay, like not so anxious or not so worried or not sad or right, not wrong, very important. And you could say that's just doing, right? Like we're doing. We're doing the world. So meditation practice is actually dropping all the doing and instead being. So even though we really all have the capacity to just be, it's a little unknown territory for us because we're so busy, right? Trying to make things work for ourselves. But in meditation, we really have a set of very basic methods or techniques to encourage us to rest, relax, just be present. We know that we get worried thoughts, but in meditation we say, oh, worried thought just passed by. Here it comes, and there it goes. So it takes a little practice, but it's quite doable. So we know that the tradition of meditation, we're very familiar with it from the Buddhist tradition, which is 2,500 years old. It undoubtedly predates Buddhism and certainly was practiced in the Vedic era in India and in China and all those places. the basic way you be instead of do has not changed in all of that time. But the way we learn it and the way we explain it and the way we ease ourselves into the being and have all the doing come up and know what to do with it. Those kind of instructions, for us to really absorb them, they have to be offered to us in a language that makes sense, right? That resonates, because otherwise we're not gonna be able to grasp it. And it's helpful if it's offered to us in a context that supports meditation. So the difference between, I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I thought meditation sounded really interesting, and I'd go to the library and read books about it, but I didn't have anything like a meditation center, and anybody who knew anything about it or could put it in my language. So it's the language, somebody reliable to tell you about it, and a setting where it's supported is what's really helpful to people. And the metaphor in Buddhism that they use is like the water is always the same, but it's the vessel that gets adjusted to the particular circumstance. So what I've been saying to everybody is that when we say Shambhala in our meditation community, we're talking about that kind of a vessel that we actually are co-creating for a set of teachings that I'll be talking about this more, but spring basically from the Tibetan tradition of Buddhism, which is not the oldest form of Buddhism, but they didn't have much else to do in Tibet. So they did a lot of meditation practice. And so it's a highly developed meditation culture. Not highly developed economically or urban-wise or any of those kind of worldly things, but very highly developed in Buddhism. So our Shambhala's, because of our teachers, been a vessel for those kinds of teachings. So that's how this name Shambhala, in our community, that's how we understand it, as a contemporary expression of the tradition of meditation. But what I wanted to talk about today is that Shambhala is actually the name of a society or a kingdom that derives from a cycle of teachings called the Kalachakra Tantra, which you may have heard of or may not. It got popular in the 1980s here. It was like a thing where if you could just go to one of those Kalachakra ceremonies, then you would get it. And that kind of faded away. But it is, Shambhala is in the Kalachakra Tantra, Shambhala is the name of this kingdom where people who lived there practiced meditation and eventually became enlightened. You're nodding, so you have actually heard of the Kalachakra. Yeah, it's customary. So Kalachakra means the wheel of time. The actual cycle of teachings arose in northern India in the 10th century. So it's after the foundational teachings and the Mahayana teachings, then you have this cycle. More mystical sort of Buddhism, I think, related to the fact that Hinduism had started and there was a little bit of a competition, Mitali's nodding, like, I'm more mystical than you. No, I'm more mystical than you. Anyway, So the Kalachakra Tantra arose in India in the 10th century, and then that was an era where the Tibetans were getting really interested in meditation. So some Tibetans came to India and studied the Kalachakra. Some Kalachakra teachers went to Tibet. And then, is it about the 11th or the 12th century, there's the Muslim invasion of India, and Buddhism got wiped out. The monasteries got destroyed, people were all converted, and so that means then where was the Kalachakra? It's left in Tibet. So, the Buddha, the original historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who was a real person, died in 473 BC. And so what we found when we looked through the history of Buddhism is all of the teachings and the traditions and the rituals, etc., that arose after the Buddha died, they all tend to have these founding origin myths that say, well, the Buddha really did teach this. It's just that we didn't know that until now. So you could take that for what it's worth, but that is the story. So the story of the Kalachakra teachings are that once upon a time in the far, far north, like maybe Mongolia, there's actually a place in Mongolia that says it is the location of Shambhala. But once upon a time there was a kingdom far north named Shambhala. The king of that kingdom, whose name was King Suchanda in Sanskrit, his name is Dawa Sangpo in Tibetan. He got very interested in the teachings of the Buddha. So he came to India, he supplicated the Buddha to give him teachings. And this was actually in the last year of the Buddha's life. And the king said, I would like to wake up, become enlightened. I'm very attracted to your teachings. I think they make a lot of sense. I cannot become a monk because I'm a king. And I can't give up my worldly possessions because I need them to have my court because of my social obligations. So the story is that the Buddha then sent all his monks out of the room, and he gave Suchanda the Kalachakra teachings. And I'm going to say a little more about this later, but kind of the main theme was that while it's helpful because of our addictions to material pleasures, if you know what I mean, and all of those things, it's helpful to be able to be a monk and just give those up. That will help your practice. But you can actually keep all of those worldly activities if you're not attached to them. If you can learn how to enjoy good food and sex and love and whatever else monks don't do, sleeping late, whatever. But do it with an awake mind where you're not using it for your ego benefit, then that can also be a path to enlightenment. So that was the teachings, that kind of the flavor of the teachings that the king gave to Suchanda. So then the story goes that Suchanda went back to Shambhala, and he initially gave what's called the Abhisheka, the empowerment for these teachings, to his, I guess you call him his cabinet, his counselors, his high people. And also the practice of meditation, because of course meditation goes with this. Being the Buddha, that was basically his theme. And King Suchanda spent the rest of his life teaching the Kalachakra to this group of people in his kingdom, and he passed this along to his heir, to his son. And that practice of teaching, practicing, passing this on through went on through 7 generations, or about 600 years. This is the story, right? So we have a chant in Shambhala that makes reference to the 7 Dharma Rajas and 25 Rigdons. You may or may not have come across it. Those are the 7 Dharma Rajas. Then, the story goes, at the turn of the 1st century BC, the king of Shambhala at that time was named Manjushri Yashas. He got worried that the citizens of Shambhala, those who were not practicing the Kala Chakra and the meditation, but instead were practicing their own different religions, he was afraid that there would be a polarization among those people, that they would start to fight with each other and claim superiority and inferiority and do that sort of secular division thing that we know so well. So he decided to offer everybody in Shambhala the Kala Chakra teachings and the meditation practices. And there's a whole story about that, how some of them said, no, we're not going to give up ours, and they left, and they went to the edge of the kingdom, and then he was worried, and he really invited them back. And the very much feeling of that was inclusion. We want everybody to have this. You can keep your own traditions, but this is a valuable practice. So it says that he was able to do that by showing, well, you're... I still don't know if that's Hinduism or Pri, but if you're this particular tradition, our tradition resonates with that. The Kala Chakra resonates with that. So he was really making it an inclusive kind of practice. So the story goes, as I suggested, that the people in Shambhala, who lived in Shambhala, practiced the Kala Chakra, the meditation. They had profound experiences. They kept their traditions, but they related them to these wisdom traditions. And then it said the boundaries between the traditions began to dissolve. And then the story goes that their understanding became so subtle that these people disappeared from this ordinary realm, and you couldn't find them in material form. So it became a hidden kingdom which you could only experience in the spiritual realm. So, any comments about this so far? Kala Chakra, Wheel of Time. It's in Shambhala, our community, we're not practitioners of the Kala Chakra particularly, although some people have gotten empowered in it. But there are Kala Chakra teachers. There was, what's his name, Kinchel Rinpoche, who lives in Australia, did a North American tour a couple of years ago and offered the Kala Chakra teachings to people. A couple of people I know went with him on a pilgrimage to Mongolia, to the place where Shambhala was supposed to have started. And he offered Kala Chakra teachings there. So as a community, we don't practice the Kala Chakra, but and Trungpa Rinpoche was very clear about this in his book. He uses the image of Shambhala as an inspirational image to say to us, look, there can be a society that supports meditation, and it could look like this.
So at one time, supposedly, there was a physical place called Shambhala.
Right, in the story. right.
But
In the first chapter of Shambhala, the Sacred Path of the Warrior, he has, Trungpa Rinpoche has a whole passage where he says, some people say there was a real kingdom. In fact, some people say they've discovered maps to the kingdom, and they've actually gone and tried to find it. Some people say it was always a myth, an inspirational myth. Some people say if you practice it, if you sincerely believe and practice it in your mind, then your mind will shape Shambhala.
kind of reminds me of the Garden of Eden in Christianity.
Yes, I think humans tend to do these kinds of things.
Yeah.
I always think about Brigadoon, the musical, how, this peaceful little kingdom and then it disappears, or Camelot.
Mm-hmm.
At one time, people in Shambhala said, it's kind of like Camelot, trying to explain it. But at the same time, and I want to talk about this more next week, I think, there's more to the story, because the story of the kingdom, there's a couple more pieces to the story. The story of the kingdom is like, you had the 7 early, the kings, by the way, they are called the Rigden kings. I think Rig means awake and Den means family, I think. So that picture that we use on top of our shrine for where you'd expect the Buddha, that's a picture of the Rigden, actually. And when I say that to people, say, that's what Buddha would look like if he was actually in politics, running a kingdom. If you come up and look at that picture, I think he's got a little Buddha floating on top of his head up there as his inspiration. The Shambhala story goes that there are 25 more Rigdens after the first 7. And I think right now in this present age, we're, I think, at Rigden 21. I'm not sure, but somebody knows. So there's a story of a Rigden who was the king of Shambhala during World War II. And then there's the story about the 25th Rigden king, who the prophecy goes, comes back here and helps us in the Dark Age.
So Rigdon is king, or is it?
No, it's like, so you say Rigden king, it's like the awakened family king.
Okay.
It's like I guess that's a Tibetan word, Rigden. So I'll say more about that next time, and I'm gonna try to find Joanna Macy, the environmental activist who passed away last year as a Buddhist. She was very touched by the prophecy of Shambhala, so I'm gonna try to find a video clip of her talking about it, because it's really interesting. But I think for us, I take really 3 things from the Kalachakra story that mean a lot to me in terms of vessel. And one is that we don't have to isolate ourselves from our ordinary lives, that our ordinary lives can become a way of waking up if we have that attitude. That's why the king could still be the king. He didn't have to be a monk. We don't have to separate ourselves from pleasure and the senses and beauty. We just have to learn how to use them without becoming addicted. And then the third one is really that story about, I find it very moving, that you have these, everybody with their own spiritual traditions could find what they have in common, and actually not have to give up their other one, but actually just bring the awakenedness out of what they have. So that's Shambhala, episode 2. So what we're gonna do now is just take a stretch, and I'm gonna light the shrine, and then we'll do 25 minutes of meditation. And I'll tell you what happened after that.